I'm not gonna sell you on the. I'm sure you've all heard and or can give the magic of of all the wonderful things that 5G could do. I do want to give you some insight into why Microsoft has a 5G vision in the first place and how we see it being important, because we really view particularly the convergence of 5G technology is that opportunity to bring together the whole user experience in a 7x24 always on connected world. The ability for the user to get from the mobile to the cloud, from the device to the connected service, is all about the delivery of our service in addition to the delivery of the service of the operators. And so from a purely self-centered perspective, our ability to get that right so that the experience is simple and it's secure and it's resilient is core to our mission. And so that's sort of the initial thesis for our engagement more deeply with the operators in the 5G world. And then there's some unique data points that we have coming off of, we call, we get unique signal from the market in terms of some of the other assets we have. As you may or may not know, we're processing 5 billion, trending actually to almost 10 billion cognitive services transactions per month. So we can see in what industries and where the excitement is around that, coupled with people actually kicking off machine learning experiments where we're doing more than 1 million of those a month. So we see the industries and locations and the excitement around the power of AI and ML in the real world. And then similarly, we're also, deeply attuned to some of the challenges that come with scaling up an IoT practice. Really, our view here is that IoT is exciting, but has not even come close to realizing its full potential yet. And we really see this as an opportunity to partner with the operator community as well as the broader ecosystem to really supersize IoT in a significant way. So the three specific areas where we're seeing the opportunity in 5G is, first of all, just bringing 5G together with the power of edge computing, right? Our Edge Zone's offering to offer ubiquitous compute where you need it, when you need it, at the speed you need it, and that's obviously is our goal to be the world's computer, an important part of getting that capability out there. When you couple those abilities, say for example, the 5G URLLC, ultra reliable low latency capabilities, the time sensitive networking, together with the power of cognitive services and the IoT capabilities, you get into a place where you see the intersection of the virtual and the physical world. This is the ability to take real-time action based on insights garnered from AI and ML. If you think about it, in the traditional 4G world, you put a Cat M1 or a narrowband IoT sensor on a crate or a device, it would ship data back to the cloud would process it, and it could spit out a set of analysis and recommendations about what you could do next time something came up or next time that situation arose. We believe with sort of the power of sort of edge compute along coupled with some of the innovations around intelligent video and the low latency response, the sub 10 or sub 1 millisecond response times, you can now use the power of AI and ML in the real world to do things like stop the robot arm from swinging at someone's head. You can use it to make real-time adjustments to what's happening with industrial machinery. You can use it to insert dynamic content for folks working on the shop floor. So it actually just expands dramatically opportunity not to address traditional IT problems, but the next generation of operational technology challenges. And then finally, much as today, normally we would have tried to do this in person, but things intervened to stop that. We see the next generation of content forms really being delivered through 5G, right? We have a mobile first generation. If you think about it, the most avid consumers of content today have grown up in a mobile first generation. If I were to show you a picture of Roman soldiers holding cell phones, you might laugh at it, but my kids would look at it and might think, hey, that doesn't make sense, but it wouldn't be intuitive to them because cell phones have always been around. Smartphones have always been around. And so, mixed reality, the way that we interact with each other is going to change. The way that we play in terms of the opportunity for the next gen content experiences, and then finally the way that we work will all change, delivered over this. And we really believe the intersection of cloud and 5G is going to make that a truly awesome integrated user experience. And as I said, there's 1,000 more places that 5G is awesome. I'm not going to pitch you on that because you probably know it better than me, but these are the signals from the data we get from the services we have today. This is where we're seeing the opportunity. Talk a little bit about how Microsoft wants to approach the problem. The intersection of the hyperscalers with the operators has caused some debate about what the roles of each will be there. In the end, our goal in coming into the 5G space isn't changed from our core objective. With the secular move to SDN and NFV, you already see a trend towards adopting cloud-friendly technologies with the 5G service-based architecture. You've got a microservices cloud-friendly type architecture for 5G itself. So we actually believe that it's a natural evolution for the network itself to adopt cloud technology. So this is for us. We still remain a platform. It's still all about moving workloads to a carrier-grade cloud, right? We just want to see the Azure meter spinning. In the process, just like we've done with other parts of our business, we're not a data aggregator. We're not a supply chain aggregator. This is all about partnership. For us, the operator and the application provider, it's their customer, it's their brand, it's their idea operating on our technology. And we've recognized that there's some unique attributes to both telco workloads, the workloads that service not just the end customer, but the network itself, as well as this next generation of applications that says the definition of cloud itself will change. And that's really, we've been a long proponent of hybrid computing. The phrase "we'll meet you where you are" has been around for quite a while at Microsoft. It's all about our ability to put that cloud experience, whether it's on-prem at the enterprise, whether it's the edge of the network, the near edge or the far edge, or in the cloud itself. What we want to be able to do is give a ubiquitous experience in terms of orchestration, lifecycle management, security, and DevOps, but make sure that the cloud presence itself is where it's needed, right, as part of the commitment to ubiquitous compute as well as hybrid cloud. The other thing, and part of the reason we're having this meeting today, is we believe this is a massive ecosystem play, right? Just as has been for any, the sign of a successful platform is a thriving, successful ecosystem. So we want to work very closely with the providers. We may have our own first-party solutions, but we also are very, very focused on making sure that third-party solutions will work on the platform. We are big believers in cultivating the next generation of innovation with the entire ecosystem and want to work closely and recognize that particularly in this space, it's going to be a heavily integrated ecosystem. So we're paying particular attention to that. And then finally, when we talk about the technology, it's revolutionary, and it will have a revolutionary impact. As you know, this is a space where things evolve. And so what we want to be able to do is act as a trusted partner with members of the ecosystem, with the operators, with the application providers, to help people adopt this technology at a pace that makes sense for their business. So, essentially, Azure for Operators is Microsoft's thrust into providing a carrier-grade cloud that will support telco-grade workloads. So towards that end, we bought Metaswitch, we bought Affirmed. Metaswitch is a provider of both packet core technology, voice and data protocols, as well as a complete voice stack. They were one of the early pioneers in delivering those capabilities on a containerized basis, so it makes sense to grab them and bring those in-house. Similarly, we bought Affirm Networks, which was an early leader in virtualization and software-based solutions for the packet core of both the 3G and the 4G network, and soon to be the 5G SA piece of that. And so, grabbing those engineers and having that as first-party offers helped us have the telco DNA in-house. So we now have several hundred solution architects that know how to talk to operators in their own language and understand their needs. And we have hundreds of engineers at this point that understand what telco grade means. And we're building that ourselves versus sort of on the backs of our customers, expecting them to educate ourselves. However, we have a saying at Microsoft that says first party equals third party. So we will build the same capabilities we build to support telco grid workloads for our first party solutions will get put back in the platform and made available to everyone. Because again, we're quite proud of the fact that Microsoft partners make about $8 in revenue for every dollar in platform spend, and that's a model that's driven our success. We don't plan to mess with that. And so we're just as happy. I just got off a call with a tier one operator in Europe where we're busy figuring out how to get an Ericsson packet core onto the Azure cloud. I'm happy with that, right? They decided they didn't want to go Affirmed, and it was all good news.
No,
so
I wanted to go deeper, but I'm
1 second, Michaela, you're not on mute, my friend. If you don't mind muting.
I thought she was just excited by what I said, but okay.
No.
Yes, Shawn. That's right. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to pause here for a second because usually the principles discussion, because there's so much back and forth in the industry on this, generates a few questions. So I'm happy to pause for a second, take some questions. Well, I'm talking about this from an operator's perspective. Keep in mind, this whole strategy is geared around making the capabilities. We won't have succeeded with our strategy if this isn't something that applies to enterprise, to government, and to operators. We've communicated mostly because most of the discussions between the hyperscalers and the operators, because I think in the enterprise and government space, it's way more established about how we operate. We're actually, we're going to continue to maintain that model. And for many of you that are on the call today, I think that's the trajectory we want to work with. We just need to bring the operators, we didn't buy Metaswitch in a firm so we could become an operator. If we want to become an operator, we would have bought Spectrum. We did not participate in any of the Spectrum bids that are out there. We didn't buy C-band. We didn't buy CBRS access licenses. We want to partner with the carriers, but we need that whole experience to be super secure, resilient, reliable, and simple so that we can really supersize the application ecosystem, because that's really the goal here, right? We will never attain any of our objectives, either for ourselves or for our operator partners, if we don't work closely with folks like yourselves that are bringing the real value, which is the application stack.
Right.
So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions at this point, just because this usually generates some comment or questions. I'm also open for feedback on anything you see here you may agree or disagree with.
Shawn, so I think it's safe to say, but a lot of the great content you just shared really is pointing Microsoft to a 5G opportunity primarily in the enterprise. Now, all carriers, as you know, have a very big footprint in consumer, and you certainly want to enable those platforms as well. But besides just the move to 5G and the cloudification of those networks, is it safe to say that your collective interest at Microsoft is continue serving the enterprise as well? Do you see that being a bigger opportunity?
We see lots of consumer. So the cool thing about consumer applications, things like, it may be further down the line because for lots of reasons, right? 5G itself has to hit more consumers before it comes, and there's got to be a more ubiquitous deployment. So I think the early opportunities will be in enterprise. But if you think about it, the next generation of content forms, AR and VR content, the ability to do simulcast or multicast video from originated point inside, a lot of the high def video capabilities. There's a ton of activity around that. That whole notion of having sort of that extended perimeter, like as people build out their smart device ecosystem in their home, you've got to have sort of maintain context around that and keep people's data and home secure. And that really comes with a close linkage from mobile to cloud as well. So while I think we see a lot of early activity and excitement around this in the enterprise space, there's a ton of activity for consumer gaming, next gen content form in particular, just different opportunities for different formats of broadcast video. And then, again, this extending the simplicity of wireless into the and then the low cost elements that wireless can become into consumer connected consumer goods, right? So a lot of people have smart things don't enjoy the process of getting it connected to Wi-Fi. It's not uniform, it's not secure, or they want the adjunct of cellular to do that. And so this gives the opportunity for people to potentially embed connectivity into their products without the consumer having to think about it, beyond just enabling that, basically saying, yes, I agree, I want a connected device, in a way that I think is going to help supersize their ability to generate services revenue. So we see a lot of interest in the manufacturers about just creating connected devices that then sell on to consumer. So lots of opportunity in this space.
Okay, that's actually really interesting because most often in a lot of our roundtables with all partners and then folks we've brought in, there's been this resounding, hey, there's a big opportunity in enterprise, but actually this is the first where we've had a really good positioning of the consumer opportunity as well. So thank you for that. One area I'd love to get your perspective on, some of it which is in your days here at Microsoft, but others from your days at Verizon and some of the conversations you've had outside with other carriers as well. This transition to 5G is a pretty pivotal one for the industry, right? It's moving from monolithic-like systems to more cloudification of their networks. And in that brings a whole host of new capabilities, new products, new services they potentially could sell. If you were to summarize what are like the top 2 or 3, let's say top 2 sort of priorities that the carriers are looking at and how they're trying to mobilize those opportunities, what would you say those are?
So right now, so you think about when specific to 5G, you think about the evolution of it. Right now, most people have deployed their 5G radio, right? Or are in the process of doing that, which means and in many cases, they're doing dual core strategies, right? Where the ENDC Model 3. that just gets you sort of the upgraded radio, which in many cases, they're looking to show just the raw power of more bandwidth to accelerate the consumer experience, so that they can capture sort of the early shift to 5G amongst consumers. As they get more into the implementations of the 5G SA, which is a standalone core, that is when they can start, that's when the network itself becomes a lot, you get a lot more software defined features. You can offer those more sophisticated services in the background. So people are starting to look at what they offer there, and there's a couple places. First, they're looking at how they offer APIs out to the developer community. There's a recognition that they'd like to get standardization so that the developers don't have to build a solution that only works in one particular network. I think they're past that stage. They've seen that that's limited the growth of IoT. So we're engaged in a lot more conversations about how you get a much more universal strategy across operators, and consistency across operators in terms of the data and functionality they support to encourage the development of the application ecosystem. We see, as I said, we see a lot of interest in just private networking, like just the ability to, you've got the spectrum, you've got this ability to implement so these private network implementations out there. So you see a lot of people experimenting. I was just with one tier one operator that had 60 plus opportunities in the funnel they were working on around private networking, which was interesting. But of course, the private networking is the first step, and then they're going to want, they're looking for the initial applications. And actually, I have a slide in here I can talk to a little bit of
Sure.
of where we're seeing those initial apps. Maybe just very quickly for those that we've made quite a few announcements about Azure, so I just wanted to give you an idea of sort of what assets we're bringing to the table. At the first level, for us to talk to the operators and to make this strategy work, we have to have a deep layer of interconnection, right? Especially with this next generation of services. So, we have our global WAN. We already talk to more than 50. We've got 20,000 peering points with more than 500 carriers around the globe, interconnected with them at various levels. We have more than 200 customers who connect their private network offers into Azure today. So just giving those on-ramps for different connectivity methods, that infrastructure exists there today, so that the applications that you want to build on top of that can take advantage of it. From there, we've announced the different form factors. We've announced Azure Private Edge Zones, which is sort of a single tenant device with cloud presence that sits at the edge of the enterprise that can support both 5G or 4G private network workloads, as well as mobile IoT applications. We've got our Azure Edge Zones with operators, which is where we stick we have a local breakout from the EPC at the operator's edge, which we can then move to have consumer compute on that. So a publicly exposed public MEC is sometimes what you call it. We made that announcement with AT&T late 2019. We continue to deploy those. And then obviously, you can, with Azure Edge Zones, and I think there was an announcement with them. The first one's going into Canada, I believe, here shortly. And we've got 6 or 8 locations announced around the world where we're extending Azure presence out to the edge of the cloud, which then can interconnect with the operator. So we've got different form factors for how we're bringing that together. On top of that, we offer the ability to purchase both first and third party network functions, right? So you can either get a packet core from Metaswitch for the enterprise, you get a packet core from Affirmed for the carrier itself. You've got the ability to add in NDAC, Nokia's NDAC, Druid, Mavenir. Those also work on the platform. So we're equally happy with those solutions. Similarly, we've got a whole plethora of SD-WAN, VeloCloud, Nuage, NetFoundry, firewall providers like Palo Alto and Checkpoint that are all sort of the building blocks for VNFs and CNFs that can sit on top of Azure that you can use to build building blocks. And then we expose those as APIs through a CPaaS layer up through our gaming assets, our IoT assets, collaboration with Teams to do that mobile native experience together with the Metaswitch capabilities, as well as exposing these capabilities for AR and VR so that we can, do things like dynamic insertion of content. You can actually get responses to images in a time frame that doesn't make the viewer nauseous, which is always awesome. One thing I want to be clear on is we get a lot of questions about radio access network. Our radio access network strategy is entirely partner-based. In other words, we made announcements with Nokia, Ericsson, and Samsung, as well as ASOX and a few others, CommScope. and you'll see a bunch of others coming up here shortly in terms of integrating their software and their capabilities onto our platform so that you can do a mix of vRAN or ORAN or just traditional, or just connecting traditional DAS systems into these solutions so you can get that connectivity. So we offer the stack in a mix and match modular way. You want us for connectivity, great, we can offer that. If you don't, we can offer you the platform to build on. We can offer you our VNFs or other people's software elements to build on, and then we offer that exposure up through our capabilities to help the operators and our partners use the assets we have to help them monetize theirs. So that's the vision of Azure for operators and how it'll come together. Where we are getting interest, back to your question about where we're seeing demand, this is sort of the different scenarios. I would say, and what I'll say is it has waxed and waned over time. So pre-COVID, we had a ton of interest in the retail space, that next-gen retail experience, the inclusion of video analytics along with next-gen experiences at the retailers. Was interesting. That's now shifted given the way things are. We're seeing a lot more emphasis on manufacturing, particularly around workplace safety, condition-based maintenance, high-value asset tracking, and then that connected field experience. In other words, your ability to bring the power of augmented reality in to change the way that high-value knowledge workers interact with stuff in the field. The other place that we've seen a lot of energy, particularly outside the United States, has been agriculture. And then, so basically taking private networking, establishing in a remote location, establishing that connectivity using the power of private 4G or 5G to blanket an area that traditionally wouldn't have coverage, and then back to a local cloud presence, which then can also go back to the centralized cloud over time. Ton of activity in that space. In the oil and gas industry, another place for both plants and facilities that have a need to monitor a lot of equipment, and they're looking for the next generation of SCADA systems there, as well as oil rigs, which are like little mini cities in and of their own. We see a lot of activity around there. In the government space, obviously, as you know as well, each of those bases is like their own city, their own infrastructure. So they're looking to some of these opportunities in terms of not just your traditional smart cities applications, but also just single pane of glass. In other words, why do I need to have Wi-Fi wired? Why can't I just 4G, 5G or 4G everyone, and then just manage from a single pane of glass the experience on that base? And so you're seeing a lot of activity there. The other place that's up and coming, there's a ton of talk on 5G for transportation. Everybody will have their own personal view of whether or not you need 5G to do autonomous car navigation. My hope is that somebody else goes first, sort of like my view on robot surgery. But what we are seeing is there was a lot of speculation in this. We're now seeing a lot more activity where people are getting serious about V2V, V2I, mostly around inter-vehicle communication and vehicle to infrastructure communication. All the providers have said they don't need 5G to do navigation, so I'm going to believe them since they're building the software. But there's a lot about sort of the experience, the interaction with the infrastructure that people are moving aggressively towards, and we're seeing a lot of movement in the transport industry. So those are the areas that we're seeing interest. A lot of these then, once we start talking about things like in-car experiences, or we start talking about we move past workplace safety and condition-based monitoring and management, we go to the connected device itself and manufacturing. Then we're talking about B2B2C and the consumer experience, and a lot of energy around that. When we talk about AR and VR, people want to sort of try the technology in the enterprise space to start with, but their long-term aim is to find viable consumer cases. And the one that I didn't put on here, but probably should have, is just as in certain, because it's so specialized, but in certain cities like Cardiff in the UK and in LA in the United States, there's a lot of energy around sort of how you use 5G to capture footage, move it around, modify, manipulate it, and work with broadcast video. So that was those are the places we're seeing demand in these scenarios. So I'll pause there because again, I generally get a lot of questions about sort of who and where and what, and it is a very different answer. The answers we're seeing in APAC right now tend to be more primary industry focused. In the US and EMEA, a little more similar to each other, with a lot of interest on the manufacturing side. But agriculture and mining are breaking open as well. So it's starting to get a little more homogenous as the use case settle down. The last thing that again, more outside the US than inside the US has been sort of the adoption of smart ports. Ports seem to be an area with a lot of security, focus and a lot of automation needs, and we're seeing a ton of activity with smart ports, more so than smart cities. Cities are coping with other problems right now. Like they'll talk to you forever, but I'll leave it up to anybody on the phone to tell me whether they actually buy. The ports actually seem to have a commercial ability to move forward.
Couldn't agree with you more on that, Shawn. There was a couple of questions that came through. One was from Amir out of Dell. Amir, did you want to ask your question?
Sure, yeah, I put it on the chat, but I can ask it. So I saw the news for this augmented reality headset that you won the contract. Do you see any connection with that and your 5G initiatives?
Oh yeah, so we actually participated, right? The DoD put out the whole RFP for one of the early use cases for 5G MEC in the field was those augmented headsets. So yeah,
right.
So as we look at that, you're talking about forward deployment, network forward deployments, right? So you got to have the network in place to use the devices. So there's a very close tie, and then it's just, as the capabilities get more sophisticated, first you just want brute force bandwidth, right, to do these. But over time, hopefully you're going to want to use the power of network slicing and those capabilities to optimize the data feed, the video feed, right? There's a lot of things that go into augmented reality, and I think over time that'll get more sophisticated. Now, the initial implementations don't necessarily require that, as you would expect them not to, but it's definitely, that's definitely roadmap. We definitely see that evolving and a lot of collaboration.
Sure, yeah, I saw that as one of the areas probably we can collaborate with carriers. So I don't know what's the plan, how you're going to implement those, but probably that's a good discussion for our future conversation.
Excellent. Yes, would be.
Thank you, Amir. Petri from Tuple, you had a question?
Yes. So, hi, Shawn. We do automation by AI for the 5G operations, and you mentioned the third-party software vendors to the Azure platform. Could you explain the typical path for the software vendors like Nokia's or Nuage's? Is it that these companies bring a project that they are working on with an operator, and then you work together to integrate part of the Azure, or is it more that you guys identify a need and then find the vendors to integrate to Azure? What's the current working method?
I'm going to give you a weasel answer because it's a little bit of all the above, right? This is a pretty nascent industry. So a little bit. So there's a couple different paths, right? So to get this to work in front of a customer, you've got to have, it's quite a complicated dance, right? You got to be able to have the cloud infrastructure. You got to have the spectrum, and you got to have the networking infrastructure. So we all get together and try to make sure that platform exists. And I actually share a picture with you of kind of how that looks, right? And then typically either, in many cases, they're relying on Microsoft to bring an Azure certified partner to the table that works on the platform with them, or in some cases, the telco, depending on how sophisticated their enterprise practice is, will have preferred set of vendors, or in some cases, it's the customer. So actually, tragically, I've seen all three models sort of a little bit more distributed, headed a little bit more towards the enterprise making the choice, or Microsoft bringing sort of some of their partners to the table. As you would expect, operators don't typically play in the application space, so they, in the retail space, because many of them have retail operations, they have preferred vendors. A little less so in the manufacturing space, and not so much in oil and gas, right? So it all depends on where you've got the expertise. So typically, what we're seeing is something where, say we'll have a partner, like take the one we did with Telstra. So with Telstra, we did something where we took live video analytics, our live video analytics platform, as a base case, along with some retail analytics work that was done by a partner, put it together and optimized the interfaces for the live video analytics over the Telstra IoT network, put that together, and then Telstra offered that as a managed service on top of our platform in concert with the software provider to the customer. Now, the way that worked is they actually offered a managed service that provided the infrastructure, and then the application vendor was somebody who sat on top of that infrastructure that they co-sold in with. And I think that's going to be, when you're all said and done, but this is more opinion than fact, it's likely to be that the operator and Microsoft will come together, sort of as I'm showing on this page, with a stack of stuff to manage the infrastructure, and then they're going to operate a curated ecosystem of partners to, for factory in a box, or dock in a box, or shop in a box, We may have to come up with something more creative on the naming. I'm not in engineering, I'm in engineering, not marketing. But that's the that's the model, right? Like, because once you sell in the private networking with the connected space, with the connected capabilities, the obvious thing to do is then go back in and keep expanding your ability to automate more and more of that facility, automate more and more of that process, and by virtue of that, you bring in more application opportunity. And I would suspect that there'll be both the SI community and the application community will benefit from that, which is a good thing for us. So we want to get our partners out in front with the customer to do that. In many cases, our partners, like many of the organizations here today, have very specialized expertise in particular business processes or industries. We don't want to cloak or hide that. We want to highlight it. It's what's going to make this all make sense to get done. Like, the technology stuff is plumbing, right? It's cool. It has to be there, and you notice it when it doesn't work. But the app is the thing that shines and makes the use case for this. And so that's why we're so focused on cultivating the ecosystem, because that's where the sizzle is, right? That's what really drives the value for the customer.
For the record, guys, we did not pay Shawn to say that. He said that on his own fruition. I have a question on that, but Robbie from Teal had a question for you first, Shawn, and then I'd like to actually circle back on that scenario that you shared. I'm
Sure.
curious to know how it actually, lands from the app provider through to the. But anyways, Robbie, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Hi,
Sure.
Shawn. Robbie from Teal Communications here. We're an EUICC platform, and one of the things that we struggle with is finding GSMA-approved facilities for the storage of networking credentials. And so right now we do kind of like a bare metal hosting solution. One of the announcements that we've seen is this Azure instance in France that is GSMA-approved data facility. I have a two-part question. One, do you plan to offer more GSMA-approved facilities in other locations other than France? And then two, who is the best person to talk to about accessing that facility?
Tell you what, so I've been asked by a couple other people on that one too, and I should have so the answer is yes, there is an intent to expand the capabilities. I don't think the roadmap's fixed. I will be happy if you shoot an email in. I will be happy to get you connected with the right team on that. It is a subject of discussion in right now, so I think we're just trying to work through it on the prioritization list. But there is an interest in that. We recognize the need for it. Our friends at T-Mobile, I think, have sort of also asked that question, right, for their own knowledge. So
yeah.
So we want to make sure we have an answer, and I would love to give it to you today, but I need to come back to you because I don't, yes,
yeah,
our level,
bare
yes, but specifics matter in this case. So let me come back to you with when we have for sure a roadmap.
Yeah,
but happy to work with you on that.
I know it'll be important for you guys going forward because like the HSS functions, like not just doing eNodes, but like doing full EPC functionality. There's going to be a lot of need for operators to store credentials locally. Like you said, T-Mobile probably wants to use a approved facility within the U.S. Teal's comfortable with France. We actually already host our bare metal in Europe in an approved facility there. So yeah, appreciate the response and the offer to connect us with the right people. So thanks, Shawn.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not claiming that T-Mobile is committed to run EPC on Azure. If anybody from T-Mobile would like to contradict me, you're welcome to. They've asked a lot of smart questions. The T-Mobile team has been very engaged and asked a lot of smart questions with us, and I'm sure with many other people in the industry as well. So.
Hey, Robbie, thank you for that question. When we chatted about that yesterday, I think you had said that Azure was one of the only or the only public cloud provider that did have that compliance in place. Is that correct? Did I hear you right on that?
So we're an AWS technology partner, and we're not any specific team, but we did partner with them for some customer use cases because they were bringing some deal flow on tangible devices. But our core right now, like I said, is running bare metal, and AWS does not offer a GSMA-approved facility for credential storage, and there's no SAS certification, obviously, thus because of that. And I think Google has something with Gemalto, but there just is. Yeah, we're really interested in that Azure France install, and we've got somebody in our Europe team talking to some general account manager, but I don't know if it's the right person to be talking to because it's more of a general Azure assistant. So
yeah, you can just shoot us an email. I'll figure. I don't have an instant answer, but I do know the right people are working on it. So
Perfect.
we'll figure that
Awesome.
out.
Thanks, Shawn.
Robbie, I think you've got, and I can help with it, but I think you've got Joseph and Michaela's emails. If not, I'll put four of us in touch on a thread. You can follow up that way.
Okay.
Cool. Hey, Shawn, I wanted to go back, if you don't mind, to that last point before Robbie's question and kind of just unpack that a little bit. So take any one of the companies in our current batch or former batches on the application side that really truly wanted to engage in some of these private enterprise engagements. You explained how that sort of is coming together between Microsoft and the service provider. Let's say it's hypothetically T-Mobile in this case. How does the app actually start to run on those networks? What is the business model? I would say I'd love to learn more about between, let's say, Azure and the service provider and the app builder. How does all that work out?
Yeah, so so what I will say is it varies by operator in terms of the sort of how they approach their managed service model.
Okay.
So again, you have to have the ingredients, right? So this is an enterprise model. It's not the public cloud model. The public edge zones is a little bit different, right? So when people buy what I'll call public MEC, which is where we stick, you do a local breakout at the cell from the cell, well, actually not the cell site, at the EPC, to compute locally in the network. Typically, what you're doing is you're creating a zone where the operator provides sort of a high-speed, super secure ramp off of 5G into the cloud. But you tend to buy that as a zone, an availability zone, or a local zone, or whatever terminology you want to use across the industry.
Yeah.
For we call it an Azure zone. You'd buy that on the Azure site, and you'd use those facilities, right? But in this particular model, this is more for the enterprise side. So this is where we deliver a solution, connected, initially right now, mostly, it's a DAS solution from our friends at CommScope. Operating across, for example, if we did this in concert with T-Mobile, it would be T-Mobile Spectrum. And then there's going to be a managed service on top of that. Microsoft doesn't do RF engineering. It doesn't manage and deploy gear in the field. It doesn't run wireless networks. That's obviously the purview. I mean, that's what the say T-Mobile is an expert at, right? They run the biggest 5G network in the United States. Pains me to say that because I came from somewhere else, but they've got that capability, and that's their experts in their field. And then we give them the tools to provide the management of the EPC of the software capabilities you need for the outbound side. So if you think about it, you need a DAS system on one side or a private LTE system on one side. Facing out to the customer connected devices, you need things like an SD-WAN engine and a firewall, or for public connectivity, or Arista for private connectivity, for example, on the back end of that. And then you need some EPC and potentially vRAN software running locally to manage that. So that's one half of the box is dedicated to providing the infrastructure. The other half of the box has sort of got the Azure experience on it, where you can go to the Azure workplace, you can download the application. So if it works in the Azure marketplace, we can pull it onto this box and execute on it. And the operator has two opportunities to deliver that. They can just make it sort of customer owned and managed on the application side, in which case it's sort of the customer signs up for the Azure experience. It pulls the applications down, or the operator or the managed service provider. In other words, the application provider could show up as a Microsoft CSP, where they lock down the box, they take over management on the customer's behalf, and then it goes through their complete management platform. And we're seeing a mix of those. So for the most part, I'm seeing customers who want to manage the infrastructure and manage the box and leave the application side sort of open to the customer to own and manage. But there is, with the launch of, say, for example, we did Singtel, the 5G MEC with Singtel, a few months ago or a few weeks ago. In that case, Singtel is acting as a front-to-back managed service provider for the whole experience, including the application layer. So whereas others have opened the box up much more. So it's been different depending on the operator.
Okay, that makes sense. And not breaking into too much confidentiality around Singtel, but that one's really interesting. I read that release, and so, as a managed service provider, is it safe to assume that Singtel is truly acting like an MSP, which is, here's your managed service agreement and we'll charge that per month and so on, and you're good? Or are they doing that and sort of inserting some cloud consumption pieces where not only are they managing that environment, but they're also going to perhaps even generate some new revenue on the consumption side of that? Is that even in scope of that opportunity?
Yeah, so I'll go back to what's public.
Yeah,
I'll say I'm
that's
going
fine.
back to what's publicly released, not because I'm hiding anything, but just because it's
Sure.
it's safer and it's what I know. But so essentially, they weren't doing this for charity, so they plan to make a lot of money on it.
Yeah.
And
I figure.
so
Yeah.
and as again, if you think about it, the way the program's structured, is because they're that end-to-end managed service provider, they take a piece of the whole solution across the board, right? And so in that model, they're signing up, they're bringing the customer to the table, they're doing the work, they're managing it, they take on that, so they're taking they're taking they're enjoying the revenue results from the whole end-to-end solution. They in that pace end up negotiating the agreement with the individual app providers, right? Because in that model, they're choosing the apps and what they put forward. So in that case, the operator is making the decision. Otherwise, for the most part, and what I think, the Singtel model is good for Singtel, and I know I sort of know the specific circumstances why they've got it set up that way. And in some industries, that's going to make a lot of sense. In other cases, the value comes in from just expanding the connected experience, the security, the management that can be sold on top of it, which case it's to the operator's benefit to have a very, very large application portfolio on the platform, much as it is for us, in which case they sort of open it up a bit more. And in some cases, we've got managed service providers. So like in the case of some of the SIs, that are out there, they're building complete industry in a solution box. So they'll come to us, one operator who operates as a SI pretty often, as well as a few of the sort of more traditional SIs you see on the page, have come to us with sort of a much more, they've got a view of how a connected manufacturing facility should operate. That's a combination of the Microsoft capabilities, this platform plus their own. And then they go to the customer and give them sort of a complete, hey, here's the scenarios we would do to wire up your connected factory. Here's how we'll manage the existing technology that's in place. By the way, here's all the other areas, and here's the first 3 scenarios we see for you that we can add for abilities into the solution. And then they sell that whole sort of, again, I'll call it factory in a box or a consistent, integrated manufacturing option to the customer. And they've been successful with that as well. So it's been, and that's where, because those people have deep, in that particular case, they're bringing in partners with super deep expertise in particular elements of the manufacturing. They're very effective because they're talking to the ops guys and they're making changes in sort of the real money flow and delivery of services for that customer. So they have a deep impact and they're very successful with that.
Absolutely. And one thing you're touching on here is the game has changed in 5G for the carriers. I mean, the envelope of opportunity for them has grown. If you will, I'd love to get it's a question I ask all of our speakers is, I'd love to get your perspective on why the transition from 4G to 5G is different, and if you think so. And given your history at Verizon, you've certainly seen a lot of those waves play out. I'd love to get your perspective on what differences you see in the 5G world versus where we're coming from in 4G and how that sort of changes the landscape, both on the edge and cloud and for the carriers.
Yeah, so every generation, each G has has elements of it that it focuses on that make it, there was use cases they were thinking of when they built it, right? And obviously, you had some basic data capabilities in 3G, but really 4G made wireless broadband and the smartphone experience real, right? What's unique about 5G, particularly when you get the 5G SA deployed, and that's what I'm more, you have a more programmable network, which lets the operator change both the price point and the sophistication of the services they offer to support more use cases. And that's what I'm personally most bullish on, is if we get this right, we could supersize the IoT opportunity and some of these other content form opportunities, because it becomes much less onerous for the operator to optimize around the needs of those particular applications, because they're typically high performance applications. I think the other general trend towards, just like you don't plug much in your house anymore, I think enterprises are getting to the point where they don't want to have these massive wired infrastructures. So the whole allure of that single pane of glass, where you can, instead of managing Wi-Fi and the LAN and the wireless devices all with 3 separate stacks, the whole idea of being able to collapse that and manage that has its own appeal to it. So I think you're going to see, and there's elements of 5G that make that a lot easier, right? With 5G, yep. You don't have to have 5G to implement CUPS, but CUPS becomes a precursor to being able to sort of give that it makes it a lot easier to manage private networks. When you do that, it becomes much less onerous operationally. The software programmability of the network is an absolute must for both getting that kind of quality of service experience, as well as the private networking experience you need to be successful. Again, you can do it on 4G, but it's a little bit clumsy. 5G built it in. And as we know, ease of use is almost as important as the basic functionality, because if it's not easy to use, people don't do it. And then, so I think that makes it different. Then I think the real, if we really get 5G right, which I'd really like to, just being able to link all the elements from the device through to the RAN, through to the core, and get the network slicing plus the interaction with the device properly, you can start changing the price point at which operators offer services for things like IoT and connected video devices. It becomes more practical to solve those, and then we're going to see explosion of creativity, because I think there's a lot of cool, I've seen hundreds of cool ideas out there. We just have to be able to offer it at an effective commercial model, an effective price point, and carriers have to make money off of it. They can't be excluded from the value that gets created in this going forward. So we have to be a little clever about how we do the models together and make sure that that people are seeing the value for their investment, or they're not going to do it. And that's part of where we want to be open-minded as a cloud provider, is making sure that that they're, when you're acting like a true partner, everybody does well, and the customer comes out with a great service at a price point that's reasonable for their business case. And I think, that's why we want to collaborate so closely, because we got to get all those trade-offs to work here. But it's worth doing. The complexity is worth it, because the size of the prize and the ability to change things is so cool, right? Just, all these scenarios that sound laughable, now connected cars, robot surgery. And if I told you that, 20 years ago, that you could put your entire record collection on a box the size of half of a cassette tape and play it wherever you wanted to, and you didn't actually even have to have the songs, someone would figure out what you wanted to listen to and ship it before you even wanted to listen to it, you'd have told them they were nuts, right? It would seem crazy. Now, you put your iPod on without thinking about it. And I know that's an overused example, but these things are coming, and they're coming. I have faith they're coming fast. And the reason I do is the stats I shared at the beginning. We're seeing people engage and invest in this now. And I'll just share, we're bullish because we work with a lot of smart people. There's a lot of, the crowd we have here and the folks that have joined today represent some great innovation. I live in Silicon Valley. I love to hear the great ideas that come out of here and around the world. We've got great partnerships with operators around the world making this happy. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of awesome opportunity and a very willing audience to hear this, as long as we can make it relevant, timely, and applicable to their business. And that's why working with partners is so important, because we're going to go deeper into our customers' business doing this to be part of the partners, and having people that understand that and partners that have lived in that business is critical to our success there.
Yeah, you're touching on, I think you're coming up to a year, Shawn, or maybe a little longer, your time at Microsoft, but you're touching on its 40+ year history. Microsoft has been built on the backs of partners, and it's something they have done, from the early days of 1975 onward, that has really enabled them to deeply tap into the ecosystem at all levels. So this is very much in line with where Microsoft's heritage has been, the partnering side. And I know from firsthand being there. Robbie had a follow-up question that he wanted to ask. So Robbie, I'll turn it back to you if you want to ask it.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. It's a follow-up, but it's maybe not as much of a niche as my last question. So my question is, what percentage of 5G applications do you think will have the business model of the carrier acting as an MSP, reselling the compute to the application provider, versus the model where the carrier stays out of the compute and refers the commercials to an edge compute provider such as Microsoft that's paired into the carrier infra? Do you see that there's a dominant model that's developing, or do you think it's going to be split? Do you think different carriers have different approaches? Like which one do you think will be the main way that somebody that's building a 5G application will get access to those compute resources?
I have a firm opinion on that changes every time I talk to a different carrier. So in other words, if you could ask me that, in other words, I was pretty convinced it would end up like a traditional managed service model, but I'm not seeing that. So that thesis didn't play out. So if you'd asked me that 6 months ago, I would have given so I'm actually seeing greater diversity, as I mentioned, right? So the way that we're working with some of the way you're seeing some of the model work out with the relationships that have been announced in the United States between us and other hyperscalers is one way. Some of the work that we're seeing in Asia is very different. So it's become a real mixed bag. I think it's too early to make a call on it. As I said, I think I would have a firmer opinion 6 months ago, but now I know something, and we're seeing people experiment with the business models, right? Which I think is good for all of us to understand that they're going to be in flux for a bit, to be a little bit, a little cognizant of how things work with your partners, because we're going to have to be smart about how we get that out there and do this. We want to find a way to supersize this, and that means being creative both on the technology and the business side.
Awesome, thank you.
Just to add to that, Shawn, I think the stakes are higher in 5G. Spectrum and allocation of new spectrum is only going to get more expensive. We've seen some, spectrum buys recently here in the United States, but all across the world that indicates that. And then just the density of 5G architecture, deploying massive MIMO and some of the millimeter wave technology just means that there's going to be a lot more gear, a lot more fiber running to that gear, and otherwise. And so this experimentation of the business model, I think, is one of the bigger changes in 5G to be able not only to capture some of that value, but also to keep up with the CapEx runs that are going to be necessary to build out these networks long term.
And the cool thing will happen with this with 5G will be similar to what happened with SDN and NFV. Like as you saw the evolution of what services the carriers provided as soon as SDN and NFV came out, you started to see some real differentiation, right? Yeah. There was very real differentiation between the way BT, AT&T, Verizon, Vodafone pursued those markets. The good news, I think the same thing's going to happen in 5G, which will open up different opportunities. I know our friends at T-Mobile have been pretty creative with some of their thinking in terms of how they're going to take stuff. Or how they're approaching the market, which is, and what I can tell you is, I'm not going to give away anybody's internal secrets, what I can tell you is each of the operators are thinking very differently in a way I think is going to give different partners an opportunity to experiment with options. And I think that'll be a good thing, right? I think that's a good thing for the whole. I think that's a good thing for both the operators for differentiation. I think you're going to see an increase in differentiation, and you're going to see an increase in opportunities to try different things out to see what scales. And that's really, for me, that's the seeds where the next great idea is going to come from. The next killer app is out. Everybody's always hunting for the next killer app, and they always ask me that question. And I, in all practicality, I don't know. I've given you as much data as I know today about some of this stuff. What I do know is that, just like we saw an explosion of innovation with software-defined networking and NFV, where we started to break some of the more traditional rules, you see some of the non-traditional suppliers doing incredibly well. The Viptelas, the Versas, the Palo Altos, the world of all kind of, they've really come up with some cool stuff. Zscaler, another neat another completely different way of thinking about things that's done quite well for itself. That's better for the whole ecosystem. That's better for all of us. And I see that same thing. I see a lot of creativity, and people, maybe it's because I come from an operator, and people, sort of tend to think of them as moving a little slower. I think people would be shocked at the depth of understanding of the operators in this space. They've gotten, they understand the challenge. They understand what they're trying to get done. Yes, it's an uncertain marketplace, but I'm seeing a lot of creativity and a lot of interesting thinking coming out of the operator community, which is a good thing for the application community because it'll give you more infrastructure, more things to work with. So I'm very, very bullish on where this goes.
and access to compute resources nearby where customers are going to really need it long term. Yeah.
No developer ever complained about it being easier to call on network resources, to get things easier to make it more secure, right? Nobody ever complained that the APIs were there and work consistently, right? And that's what I see people working towards. And I think that'll let the developer community focus on what they're good at, which is bringing their vision for the application that they know will change the world that's out there without having to fuss with the plumbing underneath, and really get value out of that, right? There's some creativity that could come out of the infrastructure that'll just help them deliver those services.
So, Shawn, I'm going to put you on the hot seat for a second. It's really not a hot seat, but there was an announcement made about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, and it was an announcement from Microsoft around a set of communication services that most people deemed as a way for you all to go compete with Twilio. We haven't heard much. I haven't seen much since then, but if you have any insight there that you could share as behind that decision and those sets of products and services, that would be great, and we can end there if you like.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I don't own ACS. I work with the ACS team pretty regularly because obviously it's closely tied to some of the work we're doing with the Metaswitch and Affirm team. But I think it's all consistent. Like when I showed the other picture, the picture that's sitting behind me now as I brand myself, that whole CPaaS layer that we want to have exposing upwards to the service, we're all consistent in that belief that there's a lot of value in exposing the capabilities as a set of programmable interfaces that people can use to build their services upon. So, the ACS stuff is a reflection of we have capabilities that we use in-house that people drive value from. It exposes our services and lets people build new services interactively. Some of the early users for those ACS services have been the operators themselves, right? They see it as a good way to extend their capabilities or interface more with the cloud. So I think what's happening right now is that's been announced. It was as you've seen in the past, we often sort of share, we go through with a key set of customers in sort of an initial preview mode of making that work. And that's, I don't quote me for sure on this, but I believe, ACS is kind of in that model right now but I know there's a lot of energy around this, both with sort of folks that want to compete at the application layer, and then also with, the broader communications community who are looking at ways to expand that out. So it's been it's consistent. Anyways, we spent a lot of time with Scott's team. Scott Van Vliet, for those of you who don't know, runs that organization, making sure all the strategies are in sync and the API layers are exposed. It's all about consistency and the way we expose the APIs so that people can build on them with confidence and that it's a positive developer experience. And that's and we're using the best knowledge. Again, in all fairness, right? Also, that team knows how to talk to the developer community. So leveraging that and the IoT team's strength as part of this whole strategy has been that's bringing the whole book of Microsoft to the problem, which is where we do best.
Yep, and I'm glad we touched on that. Thank you, Sue. ACS, for those who don't know, is the Azure Communication Services. I saw that news and I thought, wow, it's so obvious that you would have a service layer that allows developers to kind of keep things all in-house and native to their Azure experience. So it made a lot of sense. Well, awesome. Shawn, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. We really appreciate it. We covered a lot of ground in 60 minutes and learned a lot in the process. And I can see we have a few follow-ups that are going to happen from here on in. So we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. And guys, I've personally seen the excitement that come out of both the carriers and our enterprise customers and our government customers for this. So as you're building out your idea to change the world, we'd love to be part of that. It's exciting. And everybody here gets personally energized by the innovation that comes from our partners. So please feel free to reach out. We're looking forward, and I'm looking forward to seeing all the cool stuff that comes into the labs. This is from prior experience at working in similar institutions, just the stuff that comes up here, there will be the next killer app is going to come out of stuff, going to come out of this facility. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Appreciate that.
So love that stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks very much,
you,
guys.
Shawn. Have a good rest of your day, my friend. Thanks again for your time today.